The famous Ottovski. Welcome to the chat show.
Thanks for inviting me.
You know, it's you. If there is anyone who could be considered Kriegsspiel royalty, it would be you. You were actually member number 35 in the community.
Yeah, been here for a while since early 2021, and I don't think I was.
2021, you joined. You were
Yeah,
one of the original cohort of Europeans that came into the community.
yeah, it was. It wasn't called the International Kriegsspiel Society when I joined. It was a few months after I joined. I think it was great.
Amazing stuff. So did you find it on Facebook?
Um, I think I actually found this via YouTube. There was a video called. Uh,
YouTube.
yeah, there was a video called "How War Became a Game." That
Yeah, yeah,
introduced
yeah.
me to Kriegsspiel, and after that, I went onto the YouTube channel of the now IKS.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So when you first joined, what was interesting to you in terms of other types of gaming? What were you up to at the time?
Well, I don't actually have a really any kind of background in traditional tabletop wargaming. I mainly come from I guess, the current generation, which is I play a lot of video games such as Total War and Paradox games and all kinds of
Sure.
real-time strategy games. And I was looking for something more realistic, and then thankfully stumbled upon the IKS.
So you were coming more from Total War and some of those kind of things, and then IKS showed a way to do it a little more
Yeah.
analog, but adding some details. Cool. And if you were to break your percentage of time spent still doing video gaming or any sort of video entertainment versus analog, Kriegsspiel being one of them, how does that break out?
Oh man, yeah, Kriegsspiel has definitely taken up a lot of my time that was previously dedicated for video
It's
games. Yeah,
it's like a virus, Kriegsspiel. But a good
yeah, yeah, good kind.
Awesome. So you have I mean you were on a real run with your live games. You've done over 70 live games. Talk about kind of the early days and what period did you start with and how did you get started as an umpire? Because obviously you can play or umpire, and what got you into umpiring?
Oh yeah, well, I've always kind of uh, played with the idea of hosting my own games set in history. I used to be online on some game forums where we would have these forum games, which were kind of like Kriegsspiel, kind of like
Sure.
D&D, but you control a nation. Kind of pretty common, I think, nowadays still. And I think after my first few games, I really wanted to get into umpiring and happened to host my first game in 2021, and then it kicked off. I do remember my first game was quite memorable experience, and really it inspired me to pick it up myself.
Well, what made it so memorable?
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting. Perhaps I wasn't positively inspired in some aspects.
Right.
So a little bit of a background for how games in the IKS were originally hosted
Yeah.
is that, yeah. So uh, the scenario was the Battle of Harper's Ferry. It was an open Saturday game, and back in this point in 2021, there was this typical way of hosting and umpiring games was that the assistant umpires would go around and give reports and take orders from the players,
Hmm.
and then they would all come back to the umpire channel. All of the umpires waiting for everyone to be back in the umpire channel. And then what would happen is that the game host, the lead umpire, would be the only one allowed to actually move pieces on the board and resolve combat. So what would happen is the lead umpire would kind of ask each one of the assistant umpires what their players want, where their orders were. And you can imagine this was a huge bottleneck in
Yeah,
time,
right.
like everyone waiting for one guy to do everything and waiting for the turn. And after like halfway through that game, me umpiring, doing the normal assistant umpire stuff, I really realized that, man, I am just sitting here waiting for my turn. I'm not doing anything. this is not that complicated. I can move units on the board myself.
Right.
Maybe not resolve combat, but I can at least do that. And then what I did is I started moving around the units as soon as I got orders, and then the lead umpire kind of snapped at me military style and was like, "What are you doing? What do you think you're doing, young man?" And after that, after that game, I was, oh man, there is a
The
much
lead
better
umpire
way to do this.
could not see innovation in action. Right there, you were innovating right on the board.
Yeah, yep. But thankfully, those days are mostly long past. Even though I sometimes maybe see behavior like that, but nowadays the assistant umpires are fully on board, and I think a good lead umpire does have to put a lot of trust into his assistants, even though they are a bit new.
So that's such an interesting development. I actually watched a live game, I participated in a live Kriegsspiel last year where it was run that way. And it comes out of the UK school, if there's such a thing.
Yeah, I
The
think.
master umpire is the only one who would, or the lead umpire is the only one who would touch the board. And really, the assistant umpires were conveyors of information, which is probably how it was done back in the day. But so the innovation of everyone being able to move things on TTS, that's how much that must have sped turns up. That must have been the thing that drove speeding up turns.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big advocate on speeding up the games. I think
Yeah.
just more game, more fun, more learning experience, more everything, and it's really what I've sought for in my systems, for my School of the Umpire sessions, and in my uh, general guides for like how to run a Kriegsspiel game guide. It's really just, I think that's the way to go. I think it might be a carryover from perhaps the old Prussian academies, that way of having like a strict hierarchy in the sense that only the lead umpire
Right.
does stuff like move the pieces and resolve
Because
combat.
historically, it was the regimental XO essentially that would run these. So it was very much a hierarchy around precedence and rank in terms of who could do what.
Yep.
So the 15-minute turn were you a part of the invention of that basically?
Oh, I can't. Well, 15-minute turn in the sense.
You're part of the group that kind of defined that as the standard, I guess.
Uh, I could say that I'm a pioneer. I
Yeah.
proudly say that I hosted a lot of games in 2022. I think that's really when I broke through and really started picking up umpiring. It was after me coming back from the army after my conscription, and at that time. I don't think it was that usual to have game the average turn last under 15 minutes, but I was really kind of really trying to spread the word of uh, this kind of turn cadence that I've
Yeah.
described in my guides, where basically the umpire first gives all the reports one by one to all of the players, and then goes back and receives orders from each one of the players instead of doing that all say one by one for
Right.
each player, because then the other guys might be still, they haven't known or the whole situation, as the umpire hasn't talked to them, and they also usually, the player kind of, as we're humans, we kind of need a few maybe a few seconds at least to really go over the information we thought. So just asking for orders immediately can lead to a lot of
Right. Right.
yep.
Right. I picked up on that technique early on from one of your sessions, and right, you kind of work with a person's mind. You give them the information, and give them a second to think, and then come back, and then it clears the air a little bit, allows them to make a decision. Yeah, without reducing the tension of play.
Yeah.
There was a string in the Discord about what they tried to do prior to your arrival, and that was where they actually set up 3 tables in 3 different TTS instances, and they would try to go back and forth, almost mimicking completely the Prussian style. So the Discord approach to it actually really allowed for some of these innovations that you're talking about.
Yeah, those guys were the true pioneers. As and when I came in, the tabletop simulator had been set up and everything, but
Had been set up,
yeah,
right?
but Damon and Alex and Marshall are the ones who really kind of broke through on that front.
Right. Whoop. We hear Discord popping in the background, so that can only mean that we're keeping an eye on the community together. Talk about the development of two. I would call them well known. Famous would be a word probably too fancy, but very well known systems: the Ottovski, Napoleonic, and World War II systems. Talk about how they developed.
Yeah, so as I joined the community early, there wasn't really that many systems to really take inspiration from. My Napoleonic system was the first one I did make, although it's currently currently doesn't resemble that much what it looked like originally. It was a bit more simpler, and dare I say, a bit more unrealistic. But as I didn't have much of a background in traditional tabletop wargaming, I found that a lot of my kind of solutions and approaches to system design really were a bit different from what I even see nowadays. I didn't really think of rolling 2d6s and seeing the result like that and other things. What I saw was instead the ability on Tabletop Simulator to customize the dice, write all kinds of text on the each side of the die, basically making it so you don't need to read any kind of results table, as everything is right there. And then all of the tokens that you could have in Tabletop Simulator that wouldn't necessarily be possible in real life. So, and then, well, nowadays, then a couple of years after hosting games with the Napoleonic system and trying to, after I got the general umpiring thing down, I decided that now it might be time to really go hard down on realism and really get down um, the realistic and historical representation of a battle of that period. So while
Right.
everyone was kind of venturing out of Napoleonics perhaps into some more complicated settings like operational World War II games or like Modern Warfare or Ancient Warfare, I wanted to go back to the roots of our first games, which is kind of black powder, linear
Yeah.
warfare, and really just get that as historically accurate as possible while running everything, while running every turn under 15 minutes. So that was always in my mind as well.
So, what direction did you take in terms of realism? There's so many ways you can go in doing that. What when you started down that path, how did you think about it?
Well, the basically as I come out of a video game world, I wanted the meta to say, so the most effective strategy and tactics of the game to be the real life tactics of the period. So basically didn't I had witnessed some umpires kind of restricting the players to do some things because kind of arbitrarily, like, oh, you need to, oh, how do I say this? Well, I kind of want the system itself to be the encourager to use those historical tactics. Like, for example, I saw in a lot of games, players are not really having reserves, while in real life Napoleonic battles, the so-called men per mile, the amount of depth of military formations was incredible. We are talking about like several divisions positioned behind each other in reserve, for example, in Waterloo and a bunch of other battles. And I saw in
Right.
games that players were doing this one line meme. And I was thinking,
Right.
the players are not dumb. Like, they will do the most effective thing through trial and error, and they will naturally end towards that. And if the game doesn't actually encourage real life strategy and tactics by having those be the most effective ones, then you really need to look back at yourself. There's a saying that every time you point a finger at someone, you have, what is it, three fingers pointing back at you. So I
Right.
think really it really comes down to the umpire and the system they use.
That's such a great point. The through repeated play, the players will find the optimal path, and if your umpiring pushes them towards something that's not realistic, you're going in the not the wrong direction. You're just not going in a more realistic direction. So you wanted repeated play to push them toward reserves, as an example.
Yeah, definitely. And repeated play. Oh boy. Well, now that I'm nearing 70 games, actual, I kind of lost. I stopped tracking around
Did you?
60 every year ago. So, but I think it is currently about 70. So let's stick with that. But yeah, I did. I I I playtest through several games. Like if anyone ever makes a system and it is finished after a few months of making it and two playtest games, oh boy, I've been working on these things for like years now, improving them throughout games. So yeah, there's a lot of playtesting involved.
Well, I actually think that you are an actual pure game designer because you take an idea and you, through this repeated play, you improve it. And there's enough people using your systems now that they're basically developing it for you. And that's all just a credit to thinking about it and sticking with it. I think that's a really great model. And as a result, we have two systems that you've created that are quite popular.
Yeah, it really. I did not really make these systems just for me. I
Right.
really made it for all the people, and it really warms my heart that people are putting these resources to good use. And well, I'm getting to play in their games as well that they have created with my resources. But it really is amazing because my aspiration as a well actual student, the history major is uh, more realistic representations of historical engagements, but in the end also just more Kriegsspiel games.
So, what were your preferred sources for research for realism, as an example? So, are you a reader? Do you consume video media? What you're a history major, as you just said. What's your preferred way to research these things?
Yeah, so I do the basic common things like reading imperial bayonets and um, things like and Clausewitz every once in a while. But really, the biggest thing I do lean on is the knowledge of more acknowledged people in our community, because we do have those readers. Like we have plenty of people who love reading books upon books and really do have loads of anecdotes. So on top of digging around uh, online libraries and some websites, I do lean a lot on the knowledge of other people for my research. For example, Glorious Ruse for my World War II system has been extremely influential. I have asked him dozens of questions, as he has not only a basically an academic background uh, with some certification, if I remember, if I remember correctly, and also a military background. So kind of just talking to those people and how how would they train on X, what would happen in Y setting, why did they
Right.
do Z, and then through those answers to those questions and those discussions, I would then turn that into a efficient and fast Kriegsspiel system with the knowledge that I have from being in the IKS for a while now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Ruse has had a tremendous impact on several of our systems, to include my own. He does have the certifications, as you say, the military background, and he can ride a unicycle, which is exciting.
That's a new one.
Well, um, we're here to explore new ideas. What talk about your World War II system now that you've mentioned it?
Yeah, so with World War II, I kind of, well, this is sidetracking a bit. I kind of like representing sort of the ignored parts of history a bit. Well, World War II definitely isn't ignored. It's quite a uh, famous setting and period for games. But I found that really the average, the normal, um, let's say lower scale combat wasn't really represented in any systems. People are kind of attracted to big operational games in that setting. For example, you have everyone has heard of the Battle of Stalingrad and things like that, but no one has heard of the 1,000 people in a small sector in northwestern Russia who were fighting daily at a scale of an engagement smaller than
Right.
probably regiment versus regiment on each side. So I really wanted to get the basic thing down. And I also kind of really found that the 15-minute turn is really the ideal um, mix for Kriegsspiel, and that kind of fits the scale that I ended up going, which is players being company commanders and their pieces on the board being platoons. And from there, you can go quite well up as well. So I've hosted games with dozens of people, which can be basically a full on regiments attacking positions held by battalions. So you can really encapsulate the massiveness of World War II by just representing what is only basically 1,000-man engagement, and I think that is really just delivers on how large some wars can be.
Look, I'll give a testimony to that. I played one of your live Saturdays with Achilles on the Russian side, if you remember, and it was just this astonishingly complex and violent encounter that was in the northwestern part of the front. And we talked about it with you, and we said it's just astonishing to think that this one incredible event multiply that by 1,000 times across the whole front. And it does give you a sense of the scale when you see that magnified in your own mind of this incredibly complex thing would happen all over the place versus a war in the East where you have just the whole thing laid out. So I think I would give testimony that it does effectively communicate that. It's a super system.
Great.
What, but it does have a real Eastern Front focus. Have you had any of the umpires take it to other theaters, and have you had any experience with that?
Oh yeah, well, I would only say originally it did have a quite a Eastern Front focuses, and I really wanted to represent like asymmetric scenarios. Like I wanted it to be possible to realistically represent one of those situations where it is like the battle you fought in, a full-on rifle regiment supported by 14 batteries of artillery attacking like
Right.
a small battalion of poor quality German infantry in 1944. So I started off that, but again, throughout playtesting, by that meaning hosting dozens of games with actual people on them playing, I did develop it to be more suitable for different types of warfare. So uh, the lethality is kind of the same, and it still can be played for Eastern Front as well, of course. But I just made it more realistic, and this allows me to depict different situations. There's actually uh, at least one pretty big World War II game. I think might be around 40 players in it, being hosted by Joseph Little. That's it in the invasion of Sicily, and it's again
Okay.
a basically a thousand, not more than 1,000 man fighting in entirety. So that scale.
Right. So there's an example of another theater for sure. What is it like having umpires take your system out? Do you you know there's a famous designer Volker Runke who has his system, Levian campaign system, and he talks about having his designs taken out and created. What is it like for you? You're our own. You're the Kriegsspiel version of Volker Runke, famous, famous amongst us in having created these systems. What's it like to see it? Do you get protective? Do you worry that it's going to be used incorrectly, or do you just let it migrate? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. It is great. Basically, the whole idea was that this is going to be used by by more and more people. I kind of I also, as I'm uh, going through my academic career, I guess. Well, my studies, let's say that, and my career and social life and social life and everything is taking more and more of my time. I kind of
Sure.
like to be as efficient as possible I can with my Kriegsspiel time, and well, really, it sounds kind of corny, but to kind of do as much good as I can for the IKS via that as well.
Yeah.
And I myself, for example, I've heard in the other the other episodes of these interviews, people discussing umpires making maps. I myself have really never ventured into map making because it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time to get good at as well. So I've just
Yeah.
left that to other people hosting games. I do still host games every once in a while, and I make my scenarios. It's still close to my heart, of course, and I think it is something you definitely need to do if you are going to be making a system. Um, but as I am getting more busy, I don't really have time for that, and I want more and more umpires to increase in number. So I basically do dedicate my time for making my systems and really in general umpiring where my how to umpire Kriegsspiel games and my general consulting of new
Yep.
umpires more widespread. So that is
So you bring
yeah.
up you're part of the cohort that's earlier in life, earlier in your career, and these types of things. How do you, because we have members of all ages in the IKS, but how do you balance a busy life with Kriegspiel? What is your approach? Some folks play in the middle of the night. Some folks, there's all sorts of approaches. How do you balance Kriegspiel with your real life?
Yeah. Um, well, there is just that point of being as efficient as possible. So
Uh-huh.
knowing that you don't necessarily have the time, so you do know you do want to basically you do want to make something that will last. For example, instead of every time someone is answering a question and how do you resolve turns quickly or something, or asking general questions about how to do X, better to just include that in a uh, just in a guide that everyone can plop in instead of you personally having to go help them. So being as
Right.
efficient with your time is a big one. And then just oh man, I wish I could be better with real life scheduling, but I'm not. Sometimes there are deadlines, and sometimes you have to meet them. But I'm also at the same time taking the full enjoyment out of university life. So I have definitely have not had that much time on Friday evenings and
Right.
Saturday evenings that often to play in games.
Well, we're a very curious group, right? So when it comes to playing, we're incredibly organized. We have planning channels and all that. But when you talk to any of our members and they're about their real life, they're just completely disorganized in real life. So we have it completely backward, so,
Yeah,
which is fine.
definitely.
That's part of the fun part of being in the community. Which I guess takes us to your comment about making things efficient. Really takes us to your checklist. There's probably been more games that have been created off the back of your checklist than any other in the community. Talk about how the famous Ottovski game preparation checklist started. Was it something that made you personally efficient, or were you giving it to somebody else to help them? Where did it start?
Yeah, so for the uninitiated, this document is basically called how, if I remember out of memory, how to run a Kriegsspiel game checklist
Yeah.
and guide by Ottovski, and it is basically exactly that. And it's basically I had been throughout 2022 and 2023, I think as well. I had run
Mm-hmm.
a lot of school for the umpire sessions, telling new umpires how to host games and how to resolve turns quickly and everything. And I again kind of fallen back on the efficient use of my time and actually also their time. I realized that I'm basically just saying the same thing every once in a while, and sometimes I'm using up several hours of my time telling people how to do this, how to run a game. Um, Even in fact, when in fact there might be only a few people attending this School of the Umpire session,
Right.
and they also don't have any kind of resource to fall back on if they reasonably don't remember everything that we go through. So that's when kind of I started thinking about creating a kind of guide, uh,
Okay.
and I did create an earlier version of the guide as well, which I have now shelved, and it contains basically just a link for the modern guide. And it was actually, uh, I think, I remember it was actually in one of Marshall's games. I gave him some quite poorly worded feedback on how to run a game more
He likes that
efficiently.
though.
Yeah,
If you're going to give Marshall feedback, make sure it's poorly worded because he responds well to that.
yeah. Well, he did respond very well for that, since he did basically, as my home, basically tell me that it would be the best for the community if I made some kind of guide and checklist. So he released
I
it.
actually remember, I remember the string because I that was late enough in the life cycle that I actually viewed that go down. So I think it turned into a very positive outcome because you formalized that guide.
Yep.
So I'll give you credit for that guide. I took that guide and I began using it as written. And then what would happen is as soon as I understood something intuitively, I would just cut that paragraph out in my own version. So if there was an explanation of why you had a 15-minute turn, once I understood that in my bones, I cut that out. And then I kept that guide is now a one-page checklist of things that I know what they all are, but it just kind of reminds me to set up the roles, set up this, set up that. And it all actually came from your guide. So I have a very, very slimmed down LaFondio's personal version of your guide. I didn't keep it in Cyrillic. I moved it over to English letters, but because I'm not so good with Cyrillic. But anyway, it was good. It was good. So that guide has certainly helped me in my own umpiring, and it's helped many. So it's a great resource. So 2023, you were really on fire in terms of setting up more than just gaming. I think you actually set up the AAR channel. You've been an admin, very active in the admin channel, and still are. Talk a little about like the community itself and some ideas that you helped move along in the community.
Oh yeah. So yeah, from the very first part of me joining the community, I saw that this could be really something special. Like this Marshall guy, he's looking for us for the so-called Southern California Kriegsspiel Society to become bigger and spread the good word of Kriegsspiel, renaming the whole Discord to International Kriegsspiel Society, and I've felt that there is really some a niche of a niche, this Kriegsspiel thing that many people have been looking for. So I
Right.
myself, early in my first few months, or my first year of the IKS, I can't remember, in 2021, I posted a lot of links to the community in various game forums that brought on, I think, quite a lot of people. I think at the time we had something like 100 or a couple hundred people in the Discord, and by the end of the
Right.
year, from those permanent Discord links, we had hundreds of people joining. Then there was just generally just trying to host a lot of games for new people and greeting them to welcome them in when they join the server, so they know that this is going to be a nice community, and hoping to activate them as early as possible, because according to Discord algorithms, that activates people. So just a bunch of ways trying to be taking the most out of these new people joining, and then there was
Yeah.
yeah
Well, now
yeah plenty of things.
when you first joined 2 years earlier, you did a little campaign to try to get the word out. Talk a little about what it was like when there was very few, when you were number 35 trying to get the word out about this Kriegsspiel group.
Oh, it was great. The community was so welcoming, and everyone was hoping to get more and more people. So it was very warm, the reception. No one was hoping to gatekeep anything, and it was just people bouncing ideas off each other. Uh, it is really just been getting better and better, really, the last few years. So
How did the idea for the Open Saturdays start? I know that you had a hand in, if not, were the one who created Open Saturday. Of course, it was a group effort. But what was the situation at the time, and how did the idea come up?
yeah, I definitely was not the first to create Open Saturday. I think I might be creating a false image of how much influence I had here.
No,
I was doing a lot, but not everything. But I think it was created by Marshall and a bunch of the other old guard
okay,
members who were basically seeking to create an event which could provide a good experience for new players and really be a basically a good, um, yeah, basically be open as possible. Even it's in the name first though. So a low ceiling, well, not low ceiling. Well, I can't really call it what basic, but the easy way to
Yeah,
introduce yourself to
easy
Kriegsspiel.
introduction,
Yeah,
sure.
I did create the Open Saturday log channel, which
Yeah.
is for the umpires basically, and I've tried to start keeping a log. Well, pun not intended actually, I guess, but of what is basically bringing players more to Open Saturday games and what is not creating that much traction. So we can really get down the well, basically make that, I guess, as efficient as possible as well by keeping it fun.
Well, I saw the list. The open log came out of the impulse to basically keep a record of what we were doing in the open Saturdays, and you went back and listed out all the open Saturdays you ran, and you were primarily running the open Saturdays for a long time. So I know you being giving credit to where it's due, but also your energy in keeping that open Saturday running made it a thing because you were the main guy for a long time. A lot of those 70 games were doing open Saturdays.
Yeah, definitely. I was on a roll back in the day, and that's kind
Yeah,
of before the Open Saturday log. I had the year before done this called basically it was called the I Want to Umpire initiative, but which was just a channel that I created with that name.
yeah,
It's not really a that big of a campaign or anything, but basically I was like, all right, now we got the now we got the server growing. Now we need to grow the number of umpires because it did really seem like the number of umpires was stagnant. But this was a group effort because,
yeah.
well, everyone. I'm not, I definitely did not want to be the only one umpire, so we did have more and more people encourage each other to umpire. And then after that, we got the number of umpires growing. So after that year, I definitely was not hosting that many Open Saturdays games anymore, and neither were the small group of other old umpires, such as I think Crisis was one of them, and perhaps
Right.
Felix Gegenturn and Marshall and a bunch of other wonderful people. And then we got more and more people, new umpires hosting games, and now I wanted us to basically maybe start thinking about the quality of Open Saturday games. So
Right.
that's where the Open Saturday log came in.
It's always going to be that way, right? When we need to push and create more growth, we then have to then go back and make sure the quality follows. Then once the quality is very high, then we need more growth. And so both contributions that you've made in terms of the checklist, the log, as well as demonstrating it by actually going and umpiring, have helped on both sides of that, which is terrific. Let's talk about some details of your philosophy. I think really practical viewpoints helps us all get better. What's your philosophy on screenshots? Are you a wide screenshot guy or really tight? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as kind of realism is the driving force for my games, it kind of forces me to think quite a lot about this.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends on the period, as I have World War II and Napoleonic system. I was kind of following the old typical screenshot size of games, which is like I think a screenshot being up to 2,000 paces or something like that in
Right.
normal circumstances. And after that, you describe things out of the screenshot range because things wouldn't be clear. So you don't want the player to see those blocks beyond 2,000 paces. But then
Right.
I realized that it takes a lot of time for for the umpire to always describe everything that's outside of the screenshot. It might be even though the player, of course, needs to know if there's something there in the distance, but they might need to also know that there might not be something in the distance, so they can recognize that
Right.
chance to maneuver. So that was kind of making me scratch my head. Of course, still people are definitely. I do encourage umpires to describe things out of the screenshot. There's definitely sounds and distant formations. But anyway, as I ventured into creating a more realistic depiction of a Napoleonic battlefield, and the Napoleonic battles with my updating my Napoleonic system, I realized that one of the big factors that had a huge influence on Napoleonic commanders especially the fact that they deployed their formations in such high depth and had so many reserves, often being made up of cavalry, was that cavalry really is the meta, the quote unquote overpowered shock weapon of the Napoleonic Wars, with how fast if with even cavalry just showing up on a flank of an army, not even attacking, can have monstrous implications on the morale and plan of the opposing army. So basically, and as cavalry is just that fast compared to infantry, which has to deploy and often move a bit slowly when in formation, the cavalry can basically, in the span of a 15-minute turn, teleport around the battlefield if they start galloping or even just trot. I really needed to extend the screenshot range to accommodate for that. So nowadays I'm doing really the double of that 2,000 paces between 4,000 and 5,000.
Yeah, the player experience, if their unit just collapses and you say, oh, because cavalry was off on your flank, that's not the same player experience as the screenshot allowing them to see you've got a big cavalry unit on your flank and the player actually having a bit of that panic.
Yep.
And it's a very different experience to say, to see it versus just having the umpire kind of hand it to you. So I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
How do you deal with morale? Because you mentioned morale here, and it triggered a thought. You do a lot of, at least in your World War II system, you have a lot of tokens, and you have different levels. How do you model morale and damage in your two systems?
That is a difficult question. I would just like to say in a realistic fashion. If one wants to delve deeper into how exactly that works, I recommend checking out the resources which are in the IKS website's rules and section, and the Discord as well under my rule set. But maybe to say short, there are plenty of things, quality of troops, experience, and how disorganized and organized the troops might be at that moment, and if that enemy affects on how how much basically quote unquote morale hits the infantry can take before they begin running off the battlefield. And there's also maybe morale is, from what I read and from especially what I talked to Glorious Roots in case of World War II combat, and this applies for Napoleonic combat largely as well, is that the main basically feature of discerning good quality troops from bad quality troops is their staying power. So not necessarily the amount of troops that they can kill, but the amount of blows to their morale and how long they can this way also stay in the fight before they start running as well.
Yeah, right. That's a great point. Right. Not how good they can shoot, but how much they can be shot at.
Yep. And that kind of indirectly creates like more lethality, because if they can hang around for longer, they are going to shoot people for longer as well. But it also just is attributed to reserves and everything as well, because it doesn't matter how good of a it doesn't matter if you got the old guard fighting there, because if you just fight them long enough, they're going to get disorganized and disheartened, and you just have to send a fresh reserve wave of perps conscripts, and they're gonna be sent running. So basically what I'm trying to say is, with cavalry reserves and morale and everything, basically there is a lot of things affecting the outcome and how Napoleonic and even World War II and really any combat works. I really always try to get the details down and really trying to focus on what I think needs to be emphasized and what might not be that important at the scale that the battle in the system in question is replicating the combat of the period in.
Great points. Great points. And why Kriegsspiel is superior in that the umpire can model belief and morale in units, which is much harder to do on a board or in a computer. So because those are all very mechanical approaches. So Great points. Where do you go from here? I mean, you're emergent from school. You're getting careers gathered together there. You're in Finland, just so people who don't know you, just to identify where you're at physically, right?
Yep.
Beautiful country of Finland. What where do you think you go from here, other than continuing to support in the IKS and from an admin perspective and umpires? And do you have any new interests in terms of time periods, or is there going to be a third Ottovski set in our future?
Yeah, well, definitely I don't see me stopping Kriegsspiel anytime
Sure.
soon. I'm not sure if I'm really have much to say in case of a career path or anything. I'm not going to become a military historian or anything. I'm likely going to. My ideal is to work in a public sector somewhere, maybe in the archives, maybe in a cool office somewhere as a faceless bureaucrat. Who knows? But
Right.
Kriegsspiel is here to stay, at least for me. And I will definitely be continuing to develop my systems more and more and spreading the good word of 15-minute turns for umpires. I've been creating some period adaptations for my Napoleonic and World War II rules, since I do find that there is a lot of demand for example, 7 years war games and American Civil War games, and with the World War II stuff for Modern Warfare and World War One. And I always want to depict the intricacies of each period because I think that makes it feel special. You could, of course, take a D6 and plop down two generic units on a map of Stalingrad and call it the Battle of Stalingrad. But at the same
Right.
breath, you could take the map of Waterloo and still have the same dice and the same pieces and call it the Battle of Waterloo. But is this going to be really a realistic depiction of the battle? So I'm really looking to uh, carefully research those periods and basically provide some resources for the umpires who want to venture into those periods as well.
It's great. And you're already demonstrated skills around ensuring that there are checklists and ways that people can learn. Well, certainly, you can apply to these shoulder periods, as you will. You know, speaking of D6, I tried to get James to alter his D6 to a D1, and he just disagreed with that and insisted on using the D6. You know, I wanted to use a one-sided die, but he vetoed it. So maybe you can have a word with him.
Yes, well, there are many ways to umpire games, and well, the ways I'm out of these methods that I'm familiar with are time consuming. Like every scenario that I make, I take several in real life months to make it, and every
Right.
system I make, well, I've been working on them slowly for years. So I do understand that not everyone is going to basically be looking for this, and I think perhaps there is a basically there's a without games being posted and done in a frequent pace, there wouldn't be the growing number of umpires. So I do understand that maybe this quote unquote uh, realism that I'm striving for isn't really for everyone. And of course, I wasn't there, so I'm not sure. I can't I can't for sure say how realistic this is, but
Well, with your experience, you've done so much to help umpires come along. What did, in the fullness of time, now that you've umpired over 70 games yourself and created some of these tools, what advice would you give to a new umpire now that you've achieved the level of experience that you have?
um, well, the basic the good old best advice is probably start small. I did for my first three games were 1v1s and 1v2s. I really take my time with even my system games and even now to really work my way up into bigger games. So that is always a good advice to follow. If you are looking to create a what you like to call like a realistic system or a realistic battle for a game, I really recommend that you take the advice of a historian and an archaeologist and a probably just even any scientist into heart, which is basically make your research as wide as a puddle but as deep as the ocean. So you really want to look into the intricacies of that period and that scenario and that setting, and really make your game into a um, special kind of event. Um, and really, I think that is the best way to also respect the people of the past and come closer to what they might have experienced as much as we can. We are having
Yeah.
fun on the computer screen or in real life near a tabletop game.
There's also an added benefit to the puddle, the depth of the ocean approach, in that if you, because we're 120, as of June 2025, we're 120 umpires. When people know that you are enthusiastic and going deep on a period, people will reach out with questions, and it actually makes you better because you become a source of information for others, which then sharpens your own view on it. And so I think that advice is terrific because the community supports you by asking you questions.
Yep, definitely. Just share the knowledge and talk to people about Kriegsspiel. Everyone will love to. Everyone really is in the community ready to give you advice as soon as you ask for it, because I've definitely
Absolutely.
been using that as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything we haven't covered today in this terrific conversation?
Check out the IK's website,
Yeah,
kriegspiel.org.
there you go. Go check it out. Otto, thanks so much for joining me today and really sharing with all the umpires. This is a chat show. I don't use the word podcast because it's really just for us, right? So it's for the people who are umpires. This is umpires talking about umpiring for umpires. It's not a marketing event. So I think people are going to get a lot out of this. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for inviting me and hope to see you on the battlefield.
Let's talk to you soon.